All right, everyone. I'm excited to introduce my next guest. He has Tales from the Crypt. He's been to the outer limits. He's stepped into Freddy's nightmares, and now he's the host behind the wildly successful podcast, How Not to Make a Movie, and the donor. Welcome to the show, Alan Katz. How are you,
Thank you,
sir?
Jeff. It is a pleasure to be here. Pleasure to meet you.
I usually don't kind of theme that intro as like I did, but it just actually yours just kind of fell into place. It was
Well, I've been a few places myself, so
yeah, it just I'm like I wrote the first one. I'm like, how far can I push this?
hey, a good metaphor. Hey, until it pops, you blow it up and you blow it up and you blow it up.
You have quite an interesting background and career. It seems like it was very heavily focused in horror-ish themes or
Yeah, and it's funny. I'm not a horror person. When I came to LA in 1985, I was a comedy guy, and the screenplay that I was taking around town was a thing called Down to Earth. Yeah, it was a comedy. I grew up in the East, totally East Coast person. I went to school in New York. I went to Vassar. I was a drama major at Vassar. And when I got out of Vassar, I was going to be an actor. I went to one audition and I thought, what kind of a idiot trying to make a living this way? I thought I'm going to go be a writer instead. But hey, I was young and really stupid back then. I had a friend from school Carol Youngkus, who had become an agent at William Morris. And she said, why don't you try writing a screenplay? And I was during the summers, I was home and I was working for a film company that made training films and industrial films. And so I was working as a grip and I was writing my first professional writing. And one of the directors we worked with, he also was a big film guy. And so we started talking about this film script together. And I wrote this thing called Down to Earth. And I sent it to Carol and she said, this is really good. You come out and meet and greet people. It's 1985 and I had been to LA once before. I was a New York wannabe. And to me, LA was the stupidest place on the planet, the land of the avocado head. And I said, okay, great. And I went out for a week of meet and greet. And it was June 1985. June in New York, it's hot and humid. And LA, man, it's the desert. It's dry. It's beautiful. It's sunny. It's great. And everybody was so nice to me, man. So much smoke getting blown up my ass. It was fantastic. One night, my agent, Carol, took me to a movie premiere, St. Elmo's Fire. Very heady stuff. And then I had that next morning off, and someone said, you should take a drive through Topanga Canyon. And this was 35 years ago, before it's much more built up now. It's within the city limits, and you go from the 101 heading toward the water, and you're driving through the Santa Monica Mountains, and as they just plunge into the sea, you're within the city limits. By the time I got to the Pacific Coast Highway, I was completely converted, and I could not wait to move out to Los Angeles. I got corrupted just like that. And I got really lucky because one of the first people I met in that first week was a guy named Gil Adler, who became my creative partner for a decade. Gil was trained as an accountant. He had worked for Sid Finger, who did the books on all the Bond movies, among other things. And so Gil understood as a producer, if you have a buck to spend on your movie, don't spend $1. You ain't got it. But hey, if you can do this movie for 99 cents instead of $1 and make it look like $1, oh, better yet, make it look like $1.10 or $1.15 even, well, then you're on to something. If you could do it for 98 cents. So this was, and again, it's solving problems not by throwing money at them, but ultimately, as we began to write and produce together, you wrote your way out of the box. You didn't spend your way out of the box. And because Gil is not just a responsible producer who understands the nuts and bolts of the process, but also has the creative instincts to creatively get out of it really sucks when producers bring you into an office and there's a problem. They go, here's the problem. You fucking solve it. Go team. It's much better. I ultimately, Gil and I ended up doing Tales from the Crypt together. We did Freddy's Nightmares. And then Gil, because he was such a good producer, HBO really liked him to save projects. He went in to save a project of theirs called Vietnam War Stories. That was in a terrible problem, just spending way too much money and just out of control. And Gil went in, solved the problems, and it won a bunch of awards. And so when after 2 seasons of Tales from the Crypt, no one knew where the production was. It was completely lost financially. I'm jumping all around here.
I'll bring it around. It's fine.
Tales from the Crypt was not developed like a normal TV show. Normal TV shows go through a development process. Tales from the Crypt did not. Back in that time when Tales from the Crypt was created, TV and film were two vastly different worlds. TV was here, movies were over here. People did not travel between them freely like they do today. The occasional Tom Hanks or Robin Williams would make the leap from TV to film, but if you were going from film to TV, that meant your career was pretty much done. So these worlds were separate. HBO at that point was basically movies, and the first original programming was First and 10, Dream On, which basically were just single camera shows with tits and the word fuck. Nothing extraordinary about them beyond that. And then one day you get these 4 mega producers, Joel Silver, Richard Donner, Bob Zemeckis, Walter Hill, who approach HBO with the idea, we want to put feature film scope inside little teeny box. And HBO said, yeah, do whatever the fuck you want. And that's pretty much what the partners did. They went right to work writing scripts, no development process as to, well, okay, what's the show? What's the season? There was nothing. Even the way the Crypt Keeper came about was not through any kind of development process. He was not developed until I got to him. So they, on the one hand, they started making episodes, they started writing episodes, but Joel found Kevin Yeager, who created the Crypt Keeper puppet. And Kevin found, because the Crypt Keeper character in the comic books, in the EC comics, is an old white guy with stringy hair. The puppet is a separate creation entirely. And so Kevin created the physical puppet. He found John Kassir, who became the voice of the Crypt Keeper. But at no point in that process did anyone develop the character and say, well, okay, so who is this? Who's the character? No one did that. As the scripts would get written, the writers would throw some lines at the Crypt Keeper. And basically for the 6 episodes, the first season, 18 episodes, the second season, for the first 24 episodes, he basically just said whatever they threw at him. There was no there. Because these were movie guys and not TV guys, they didn't do any part of this TV show, Tales from the Crypt, like a regular TV show. When you do a TV show, the first run or even the second run, the license fee that's paid for it to be on the air is not going to cover the cost of production. And so that's why in TV, in the old model, you would look for what's called a deficit partner. And they were going to pay for what it really cost to make a TV show. And their hope was that they would make their money back when it got to syndication, if it got to 65 episodes. A whole other conversation. The partners never went for a deficit partner. And so HBO cash flowed the first season and the second season. And at the end of the second season, the night before the wrap party, the executive producers were handed a financial statement from HBO that said you were $1 million cash in the shitter. Get out your checkbooks, or there's not going to be supposed to be the third and final season. So the first thing, they reached for their checkbooks and they canceled the wrap party, the executive producers, and they fired the producers like it was their fault. And they hired Gil because the job was minus less $1 million, because that was now going to get taken off the budget to pay the executive producers back. See it out, see it to the grave, and that was supposed to be the end of it. Well, I was Gil's writing partner, and I got hired in part to oversee to be the keeper of the EC flame, to make sure that all that brand and that franchise was redolent in the scripts, because they'd lost track of that because nobody was minding the store. My other job was going to be to write the Crypt Keeper. And the problem was no one had developed his character. And as I sat down to write him, well, I don't know how you write a cipher. And especially if it's supposed to be funny, I don't know how you write generic funny. You know how that is. There's got to be some kind of point of view in there somewhere, or it's just generic. And so in order just to do my damn job, I had to create him just so I could write him. Now, I grew up a huge Groucho Marx fan, loved the Marx Brothers. And so the Crypt Keeper became my Groucho. And I had to fill him with a personality so I could write him. And the nearest one at hand, and being a writer I just stole as liberally from me as I possibly could. And I literally filled the Crypt Keeper character with me. And so, when we would sit with John, John's voice is there. And I don't, it's not me in appearance, it's not my voice, but everything he said and every idea in his head was me.
Did that help him also?
Help the Crypt Keeper?
The voice, John.
Oh yeah. Because John, suddenly we took the Crypt Keeper to places he hadn't been to before. And so it opened up John's ability to act, to be the character, because we suddenly gave him stuff to be. And so it was a great relationship, great partnership with John, because you'd write the script, and when we would sit and record the Crypt Keeper, it was understood that we would riff into some additional, hey, if we could find some stuff that was better, man, take the better stuff. But hey, it was fun to sit and riff that stuff together. That was really that was great fun. The truth is, writing the Crypt Keeper segments, we would produce them in like 3 or 4 at a go because it was a production. The Crypt Keeper was 6 puppeteers working at the same time. There was 3 people working his face with his animatronic face with servos. One person was the right arm, another left arm, and another person controlled the kind of pitch and lean of his body. So I would sit with John and we would record these things. Writing them was the hardest thing. It was like pulling organs through your nose, like passing a kidney stone the size of a basketball. It was, yes, decide, okay, he'll be playing golf this week. He'll be reviewing movies or cooking or reviewing or talking about wine, his love of wine this week. But then you'd have to create these word lists to begin to look for words that you could successfully cryptify and then make them flow in some kind of organized, like the story that we wanted him to tell in the setup. And so it was always a kind of a Rubik's Cube and making them work just so. And you didn't want to overwork certain words because it was really easy to overwork certain words because it gets exhausting. It's comedy's hard, man. Someone should write that down. Tales from the Crypt didn't end in the 3rd season, and it wasn't. Suddenly we reinvested in getting stars to do the show. That happened in that season, and the audience came back. More importantly, because the Crypt Keeper became a real character, he became the franchise. And more than anything, that's why Tales from the Crypt, I think, became successful. The episodes are important, and all that's important. But a couple of years ago, M. Night Shyamalan wanted to, people wanted to redo Tales from the Crypt for years, and there's a very particular reason why it will never happen. But M. Night Shyamalan, when he optioned the EC Comics, he thought he was getting the Crypt Keeper, and it wasn't until it was explained to him, no, the Crypt Keeper in the Tales from the Crypt comics is one piece of IP. The Crypt Keeper in the TV series is a separate piece of IP. Now, the problem comes here. One of the executive producers of Tales from the Crypt is a guy named Joel Silver. Now, Joel, I don't know if you know anything about Joel Silver. Joel, a great movie producer and impresario, really, in the old-fashioned sense. He's kind of got that sense of it, but a difficult personality. No, that's really a giant fucking asshole. And everyone who works with Joel eventually comes to the conclusion that he is such a giant fucking asshole that life is way too short to ever do it again. And the Gaines family, Bill Gaines' family, who owns EC Comics, they hit that point with Joel. And they would never make a deal to do anything with Joel ever again. And so Tales from the Crypt, the EC Comics, and the Crypt Keeper are permanently divorced. Where will the children go for Christmas? I don't know. Where did that land us, Jeff? I'm thinking. So,
well, let me ask a couple questions. So one is, I see why your passion for what you brought to the character, because I understand that when you're creating a character, the importance of having something that you can base it on, because you have to be able to ask it, well, would it have said this or done this, or and how would it have reacted in this circumstance? And you have to create that world.
Indeed,
and
you shouldn't be writing the character. The character, if you get to that place, the character is speaking for themselves, and you're just the typist.
The interesting thing about Tales from the Crypt, and you touched on it briefly, is that the Crypt Keeper is so integral to, I think, people's memories or feelings about the show.
Yeah.
It's interesting because when you think back, like on the only other show that I can think of, maybe Alfred Hitchcock Presents with Alfred Hitchcock, but like Twilight Zone with Rod Serling is the only, and I would argue that the reason every Twilight Zone reboot failed was because they really couldn't recreate the narrator. They couldn't replicate a Rod Serling.
It
And
is integral. It's the in and the out. The episode, you'll tolerate bad, you'll hope for good. It's the weirdest damn thing. It really is. It's Rod Serling is the Twilight Zone. The Crypt Keeper is Tales from the Crypt. With the Crypt Keeper, I do a lot of horror conventions these days, which I love. I love talking to fans. And what I've learned very quickly, a strange fact, for an awful lot of people, Tales from the Crypt was their gateway drug to horror. Then they all watched it as kids, some despite the fact that their parents who were watching it told them, no, you are not watching this. But with a surprising number, they watched it with their parents because their parents felt like there was something okay about Tales from the Crypt, which is strange. Well, it was the Crypt Keeper, because even though he was in episodes of things I know that he fried brains, he hung people, he shot people, they were skeletons. And in the episodes, we did all kinds of heinous, disgusting things, but somehow the Crypt Keeper's persona, that Groucho element, kind of told you it's okay, man. We're just burning down the world together. We're all okay. We're cool. We're all being subversive here together. I think there was something in that created this. Yeah, the relationship that people have to Tales from the Crypt is really emotional, and it flows from their childhoods in many, many cases. It's developmental and elemental.
what made these powerhouse producers and directors even want to do this? I get the idea of it. Well, let's put movie quality on TV.
A passion. Well, it was a passion for Tales from the Crypt. And hey, these are guys who color outside the lines. They thought about doing it as a feature film. HBO presented an opportunity to do little feature films. And so that was really what they approached HBO with. This way, they didn't have to invest a year or 2 or 3. They could do it in a couple of weeks. And so for their perspective, they could get their yayas without having to invest too much of their time and energies.
You came in on season 3, right, with Gil, and then were these folks? Well, I'm guessing Joel Silver was around the whole time because you have quite the feeling for him. And
yes. Gosh, yes. And we made the 2 feature films. We made Demon Knight, which was a terrific movie, and making Tales from the Crypt. Everyone in my How Not to Make a Movie podcast, we talked to everyone that we made the show with, and all of us to a person. And when we look back at the experience of making Tales from the Crypt, it was one of the highlights of all of our careers because of who we got to work with. And there was virtually no interference from the network. God, of the 75 episodes that I made of Tales from the Crypt, I think I got 3 notes from HBO over all those years. That was wonderful. Yeah, they trusted us to go about our business and make a TV show. 1 or 2. Oh, there was the episode that Billy Friedkin directed called On a Dead Man's Chest. And there was a sex scene between Yul Vasquez and Sherry Rose. And Billy shot some really, he really directed them intensely, and they got very into their performances. And then one of the shots are in the dailies that went to HBO. Yul Vasquez gets up out of bed, and as he turns into the camera, his erect penis pops up into the shot, bop, 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 bop. And it's in the dailies. And I got a call from HBO. They said, Billy does not think he's going to put an erect penis in this episode, does he? And I calmed them down. No, just the dailies. Relax. But that was the note we got. We put out that fire in about a couple of seconds and went on about our business. Back then, now...
Were there other kind of parameters that you knew to kind of stay away from? I mean, we know erect penises is one of them, but like, is there anything else? Like, well, I mean, because it was pretty gory, right? So I mean, like,
there was no, we could do anything we wanted. The only thing was an erect penis. They didn't show many penises back then. Now it's penis. Then
everywhere is a penis.
Then they didn't show a lot of penises, and certainly not a super happy penis. They might show some bush, but anything more articulated than pubic hair. They didn't have standards and practices. They just had, there was a line in the sand that I guess they collectively decided they didn't want to cross yet. Other than that, no, we could do anything. We could say anything. I think of the episode, What's Cooking with Christopher Reeve and Bess Armstrong and
I just
Judd
rewatched
Nelson
that
and
one
Meat Loaf.
randomly.
There's a wonderful, one of my favorite shots in everything that we did when Judd Nelson hacks off the two butt steaks from Meat Loaf's corpse hanging in the cold locker. What the fuck is that? And it slaps them down onto the silver tray. I mean, I can tell you a funny story about Meat Loaf, if you care to hear.
I would love to.
When we shot that, we wanted to have this scene where full body hang in there. We wanted to have a shot where Judd's character was going to whack off the steaks in one shot. You whack off the steaks and you slap them on the tray. We wanted no cutaways. We wanted it to look as authentic as possible. Like, holy shit, they're serving human flesh. That's what we wanted in the shot. To do an articulated body like that, you need a month. And we had an idea who we wanted. The moment that our casting director, Victoria Burrows, suggested Meat Loaf, that was a yes on a bunch of different fronts. One, because I was a fan of Meat Loaf. Bad Out of Hell when I was in college, that was like, oh my God, I must have worn out copies of the vinyl record. But it was just, it's hilarious, the idea of I'm casting Meat Loaf in a show about cannibalism. That's funny all by itself. Oh, come on. And then when he said yes, it was great, but it took a while to get him to say yes. And we had it, we had that body at 3 weeks. Todd Master said, we got to go. And so, well, we had an idea of what Meat Loaf looked like, big, heavy set Southern guy. And so we found a body double who we thought matched pretty well. And we cast him, and Todd went to work and created a great body double. We didn't see Meat Loaf until the day before he shot. He came in for wardrobe. When he came in for wardrobe, it was a shock because he had just finished a crash diet. He had lost 90 pounds and he was so proud of how svelte he looked now. And he won. And so we were like, oh my God, what did we do? And then he wanted to see, can I see the body double? And he said, okay. And he was like, oh my God, that's even worse than what I used to look like. And he was very unhappy with that. And he understood the production issues. And of course, we were going to shoot that body. Problem it presented was that when he walks into the scene, his body didn't look like that body was underneath his clothing. So he had to wear a fat suit.
I wrote this down. I was like, because it was like Christopher Reeve in that episode.
Yeah.
It's a hilarious Crypt Keeper intro and outro too, but like Christopher Reeve's restaurant, for those who want to go check it out, is saved by cannibalism, but it was going bankrupt because his focus was he wanted to be the first all squid company, all squid restaurant. Like,
what, you don't see it?
The
you don't
KFC
see
of
it?
Squid. It's like he's the whole show starts with him like saying squid on a stick. This is going to be the next big thing. I wrote it down. I was like, this is really funny. Yeah, Judd Nelson, Bess Armstrong's in that one. And,
there's a personal joke. There's squid on a stick. I once made my family made a trip together to Japan, and I got terrible food poisoning from eating a street food squid on a stick. and so that was kind of the motivator for the whole squid thing. So
that's really funny. It was nice seeing Christopher Reeve. Well, I guess and Meat Loaf's passed away too.
There's a documentary about Christopher that Christopher was lovely. He was interesting to work with. When you as an actor get wedded to a character like Superman, and it's such a particular character, and it's had such a particular effect on many of the men who have played Superman. I've had a couple of great conversations with Brandon Routh about his experience playing Superman. He worked with Gil on Superman Returns. It's a weird piece of casting, Superman. All casting is a little weird, but casting Superman is especially odd. Batman can be anything because really Batman is a guy with a dark past who puts on an outfit. But Superman is very much the way that he's described in Kill Bill. In Kill Bill 2, before he dies, Bill does an incredible monologue about why Superman is his favorite superhero. And he describes the fact that, yes, while Batman has to become Batman, Superman just is Superman. Clark Kent is his disguise. And so he has to hide the fact that he's always Superman. So when you go to cast Bruce Wayne, or you're casting Bruce Wayne, when you go to cast Superman, you're casting Superman, not Clark Kent. And so to make that even more challenging in film, I've cast a lot of actors. I never, ever cast an actor to act. The last thing on earth I want them to do on film is to act. In the theater, yeah, the people in the back row have to see and hear you. You're going to have to act so that can happen. But the camera, like the microphone, it's right there in your face. And it sees and hears everything. You don't need to shout. You don't. In my mind, every time they act, we have to cut it out. It's not going to make the movie. I need actors to be as honestly as they can be from an emotional standpoint. I need them to be as emotionally authentic and raw and real. I'll give them a different name. We'll put some different words in their mouth, but the emotions that flow, I don't want them to act them. I need them to be them. And that's the craft, is learning how to be on cue, more or less, be that trained monkey. But it's a really hard thing to do well. It really, really is. Christopher got cast because there's an element of Superman in him. That's why he got cast, and that's why he still sticks in our heads as that character, because whatever we associate the character, all those qualities in the character, those qualities are also inside Christopher. That's why it works.
But to your credit and the show's credit, you guys were known for casting people like Christopher Reeve off of their norm.
Oh, yeah. And that was the fun of working with Chris. But Chris, at the same token, was always keenly aware of the fact that I am not that I'm Superman, but the world saw him as that, and that was going to be bigger than whatever he did on Tales from the Crypt. And so certain things he could not do or would not do because he was aware of the fact that his own persona now was tied up in Superman's. It's a fascinating thing to watch. It had to be a very hard thing to experience because, yeah, it does limit you. You are keenly aware of the fact that you are attached to a franchise that's bigger than you, and part of your attachment is who you are, and therefore what you do and the decisions you make.
He was Superman. I mean, it was like, plus it was also, that was tied with like, it was like the biggest movie event ever, right?
You'll believe a man can fly. That was the tagline. Looking at it these days is, are you joking? You joke?
Well, you got to look everything in context. At one point, Atari 2600 was the shit. You know what I mean? So everything in context.
I was thinking the line from the movie. He catches Lois Lane and he says, "I got you," and she says, "You got me. Who's got you?
Who's got you?" That's funny. Oh man. So I mean, you worked with Richard Donner, so right? So
Dick was. Each of the partners was very different in their own way. They were really fascinating. They're all great filmmakers. Dick, total stoner, animal rights guy, the hardcore. He didn't have a whole lot to do with the show when I was on it. He was doing his movies and he just didn't give a. One episode had to do with animals where suddenly, day before we were to shoot a scene, there were rabbits that were being tested. They were theoretically, the rabbits were in cages. There were no rabbits, but there were cages and implied rabbits, and he would not let us shoot that. So we had to write ourselves around that simply because it was important to him. And I wish he had timed that a little better, but we figured it out. Joel, I think I described, but Joel, I had some fascinating experiences with Joel.
He must be good at what he does. I mean, right? He's done some amazing things. He's been the inspiration for
past tense because nobody will work with him anymore.
Okay.
Nobody, that kind of shit, it's of the past. Nobody wants to work with that anymore. And so he's been hoisted by his own screaming petard, alas, as happens. Walter, a poet. I would say Walter Hill, working with him, watching how he would create shots, a poet, especially a poet of the down and out. Bob Zemeckis everything I know about the art of compromise, the art of collaboration, I learned at Bob Zemeckis' feet. That man understands how to get the very best out of everybody. Quite remarkable. Really, he gets everybody on the crew invested in the project. And it really becomes this thing of ours. And that's why the epitome of the Bob Zemeckis creative experience is there will be at least a time or two or three, but at least once, where whatever you're doing, and in every Bob Zemeckis movie or episode, there's an impossible shot. There's something where if you know anything about filmmaking, an example, Castaway, Tom Hanks on the desert island, right? Mm-hmm. There's the shot, he's been looking at the mountain in the middle of the island, and finally he climbs the mountain and he gets to the top, and he's going to scope. As he gets to the top, we see as he reaches the summit, it's a narrow little foothold, barely big enough for one person, but he stands there, and the camera is kind of on his shoulder, and his face and his shoulder are in the shot. And he gets to the top of this narrow little promontory, and he stands and he does basically a 360, sees that the island is surrounded by reef. And if you know anything about movie making, there's a question that's in your head and it's screaming at you. Where's the crew? How are you getting this shot? Piece of equipment is as big as Tom is. How are you getting this? It's literally an impossible shot. And having worked with Bob, I know when they were on location, they all trudged up that hill to the top, and Bob said, "All right, guys, here's what I'm thinking about. And we're gonna have the camera's gonna be right here, so we can see Bob and so we can see Tom in the shot the whole time. He's gonna here, gonna turn, 360. All right, guys, how are we gonna do this?" And that's the question. How are we gonna do this, guys? Now, Bob is not saying it like an asshole going, "Yeah, you figure it out and I'll be in my trailer." He's got ideas. He is putting the question on the table creatively for all of these craftspeople to apply their craft and their experience and their thinking to. And your idea might not work completely, but it might work in conjunction with this other idea that didn't work completely. And suddenly, the next thing you know, everyone's, like I said, they're completely invested in it. And it's the most remarkable thing, not only to witness, even better to be part of, where you get asked the impossible question and lo and behold, came up with an answer. The collaborative process is awesome to begin with when it works. It can be horrible when it goes to shit, but when it works and you all stand and you look at the thing that you made together, there are few feelings of pride to equal it. Even making something yourself, you can't share that with anybody. And that's great, but it kind of makes it suck a little bit. When you've got a group of people who you sat in the trenches, the bombs going off, and you thought, "Man, how the fuck are we going to do this?" And you did it. Holy cow. There's nothing to equal that. Nothing.
That's amazing.
That experience. That's why you do it. That's why you want to get onto the mountain. And that's why you want to stay on the mountain, if you at all possibly can.
How did the show survive even before you got there with this many people without any egos clashing? I mean, those are all like real power. I mean, I'm not saying, I don't know that any of them to be a drama person, but it just seems like you put that many very distinct talents in one room, there's going to be disagreements.
Well, Joel walked point. And so it wasn't like they all had to make collective meetings. Joel walked point. So Joel was in our face all the time. Joel's people were in our face all the time. And to be Joel's people is you're a Joel wannabe, which means you're 1,000 times worse than Joel because, man, you're going to swing your little dick around 1,000 times harder because it's such a little dick. You know what I mean? It's just that's just how the politics are. It's just how it is. You endure it. In turning the show around and getting orders for a bunch of additional episodes, we also got orders. Well, suddenly Universal said, "Hey, this would let's do some 3 Crypt branded feature films." And everyone was excited about that. And the mandate was do 3 completely different movies, like an anthology. Great. And so the first one, ultimately, there were some other movies that were competing.
This is Demon Knight?
Demon Knight. Terrific script. We got Ernest Dickerson to direct, and Billy Zane and Jada Pinkett and Bill Sadler. God, I love Bill. That whole cast, Dick Miller and
Bill
CC
Sadler was
Pounder,
Death and Bill and Ted too, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yes, 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 he was. Bill's wonderful, wonderful. There are two times that the Crypt Keeper has worked with another character. In Demon Knight, he works with is it in Demon Knight? No, not in Demon Knight. No, in the beginning of Bordello of Blood, he works with someone, and in one of the episodes, he works with Death, the Grim Reaper, Bill Sadler, and in another one, he works with the Mummy, also Bill Sadler. And that was fun working, having the Crypt Keeper work with a live character. Bill Sadler could do anything. Having Bill Sadler as the Grim Reaper work with the Crypt Keeper, well, writing that one was fun to write. That one was absolute fun because you had repartee.
All right, so the first movie gets made, and then you've conceived of there's a different movie before Bordello that you're working on.
The assignment was three different movies. And when we were making Demon Knight, we were already developing the second movie. And we had developed this thing. It was originally called Fat Tuesday. And we had developed it into a script called Dead Easy. The mandate was three different movies. Demon Knight is a monster movie, by and large. We wanted to do, neither Gil and I are horror guys at heart. And we saw Crypt as, all right, we didn't want to get labeled before it was too late. And we saw this second movie as our chance to show everyone that we weren't just one-trick ponies. Dead Easy was a psychological thriller. It took place in the swamps outside New Orleans. The villain was this great Harlequin character, a really terrific villain. We spent a year and a half developing the script. Universal liked it. They began throwing money at it. We spent months in New Orleans prepping it. We were going to hire a young unknown actress to play the female lead. Her name was Salma Hayek.
Nice. That would have been a good win. Yeah.
Really and truly. And 3 weeks before the start of principal photography, Universal Pictures pulled the plug on Dead Easy. They said, stop. Don't spend any more money. Come home. You're not going to make that movie. And when we got back to Los Angeles, they stuck a script under our noses. They said, you're going to make this movie instead. It's called Bordello of Blood. Oh, you still start in 3 weeks because your production schedule hasn't changed. Your release date hasn't changed. You still start in 3 weeks. Make this movie. Now, where did Bordello of Blood come from? At about the time that all this was happening, a brand new studio had formed called DreamWorks. DreamWorks was Steven Spielberg leaving his deal at Universal to form a new company, still on the lot at Universal, but he was a separate entity now. And he began to make talent deals, and Universal was desperately afraid of losing another big piece of its talent. My executive producer, Bob Zemeckis, who Steven was his mentor. And Universal approached Bob and they said, Bob, Universal. I don't know any other part of that deal. I know one deal point. Obviously, the deal was good enough. Bob stayed. One deal point was that Universal agreed to buy $500,000, the first student script that Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale, the future guys, ever wrote when they were film students at USC. That was it. It was just a way to put money in Bob's pocket as part of a large overall deal. Probably the fact that it helped Bob Gale a little bit. I'm sure Bob, a very loyal guy, that probably helped a lot too. That was it. But now Universal was sat there with having spent $500,000. They thought, well, God, we're going to eat this. Wait a minute. Bob's about to executive produce this other movie, this Dead Easy thing. Well, we spent $50,000 on that piece of shit. They'll take it out of their budget. Dead Easy is dead. Guys, you're going to make Bordello of Blood instead. It's got Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale's name on it. Bigger than your fucking name, asshole. My name. Well, can't argue with that fact. And so that was why we made Bordello of Blood. And we were given 3 weeks to rewrite it, to cast it, to design it. We ended up making it in Vancouver. Why? Well, Joel, my executive producer, was always at war with the IA, the union that represented our crew, who worked for us non-union until one day they struck us because the union said, guys, you're going to strike them. And so they shut down a TV movie for Fox that we were doing. And so since the union went, fuck you to Joel, Joel's attitude was, fuck me, no, fuck you. And so when we came back from New Orleans and we were going to make Bordello of Blood, his idea was, I'm going to make it anywhere but Los Angeles. And so we went to Vancouver just because we weren't in Los Angeles. There was nothing in Vancouver for us filmically. There was no reason for us to go to Vancouver. In fact, at the end of the day, it was a very stupid idea because, and again, once we made the decision to make Bordello of Blood for this entirely inorganic reason, just because of a deal point, none of us wanted to make that movie. We went from making a movie that we're all dedicated to. It was our future. In our minds, this was a whole different way that our future was going to go. Instead, we're making a student movie called Bordello of Blood. Student movie. It was written. Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale would go on to write Back to the Future. They weren't those guys when they wrote Bordello of Blood at USC. I'll give an example. One of the challenges of the rewrite of My Boss when he was a student, the main character in Bordello of Blood is a small town detective. Now, let's do the math. How much business can a detective do in a small town? Not much. He doesn't live in a small town. There's no such thing as a small town detective. That's the kind of thing that a film student would create because they haven't lived in the world for 10 seconds. But our obligation was to make the character who cannot exist in the world make sense. Well, you can't. And you're supposed to write him and make him funny too. We went to Vancouver in July to shoot our movie. It's a horror movie. Horror movies, the one thing you need lots and lots and lots of, because it's a horror movie, is night. When you go that far north, in July, one thing you don't get a whole lot of is night. It gets shootable dark 11:30 to midnight. And then the first light appears in the northern sky 4 o'clock-ish. You get maybe 4.5 hours of shootable dark. We expect a 13-hour day. And when we went to shoot the climax in a glass church, stupid. Well, obviously, it was It was as impossible as everything else that we attempted to do. Not in the Zemeckisian sense of how are we going to do this, guys, but because the massive hole that we'd shot in our foot was bleeding and getting bigger every day. Just every day was stupider than the day before, right down to the casting. I mean, why did we cast Dennis Miller? To this day, I could not tell you. He is not who our audience wanted to see. In fact, Dennis did not want to do the movie either. And when Joel asked him, Dennis said, all right, I'll do it for $1 million, figuring no one in their right mind would pay Dennis Miller $1 million to be in a movie because nobody had. And Joel said, yes. Well, he didn't have $1 million in our budget for that actor, but $500,000. We went to Universal. We said, can we get some help, some breakage here? They said, I don't give a fuck about Dennis Miller. And so we had to take it out of our budget, our $12 million budget. We put most of the money into what our audience wants to see, makeup, special effects. Well, I took $500,000 out of makeup, special effects to pay for an actor.
You keep calling him an actor. I'm not even sure he was an actor.
I hired him to be an actor.
I know you hired him to be an actor. What I mean is to pay that much for someone who's really just a comedian who did.
Yeah. And look, he's talented at what he does. He is not a generous human being. And that gets quickly recognized by everyone who works with him, who is not beholden to him. And within about 5 minutes of arriving in Vancouver, man, he managed to piss off the crew. And because for other reasons I go into, but he managed to get the rest of the cast hating him. So, but that was Dennis. I know why Joel wanted Erica Eleniak. That is the thing he wanted was never going to happen. And Erica, it turned out, didn't want to be in the kind of movie that we were
from
anymore.
Baywatch, Erica.
Erica from Baywatch and from Under Siege, where she pops out of a cake. This is part of how your reputation in the movies is part of why we hired you. Then we hire you to be in the movie Bordello of Blood, and you decide you don't want to be that actress anymore after we've hired you.
You have to evolve, Alan. You have to evolve.
So
was Whoopi Goldberg in this movie too? Would she have an uncredited role? She
has an uncredited role that on a pickup day. The actor who was the most problematic, though, was Angie, and that's not a reflection on Angie, who is a lovely human being.
Angie Everhart.
It was because of why we hired her, and that was not our choice either. That was Sylvester Stallone's choice. At the time that we were shooting Bordello of Blood in Vancouver, for all the wrong reasons, Joel was shooting another movie across the border in Seattle, Assassins. starring Antonio Banderas and Sylvester Stallone. Stallone was engaged to Angie at the time. And I guess he heard that we were going to be making this movie in Vancouver. And one day on the set of Assassins, he approaches Joel and says, "Hey, Joel, here we make a movie in Vancouver. Why don't you cast my girlfriend Angie? We can visit across the border." And instead of being a responsible executive producer who says, "That's a great idea, Sly, but let me check with the guys. Let me see if that could work out let me see if that would work for them." No, he went, "That's a great idea, Sly. It's done." And we begged him not to do this because, Angie, a lovely human being, a very good person, and a very talented supermodel, but she really was not an actress. And the villain in your horror movie is kind of an important piece of casting. If you cast, I don't know, Pee Wee Herman as Freddy Krueger, it's just not going to work out good. The casting's really important. And we wanted Robin Givens. I think Robin would have been extraordinary. Angie, it was a terrible ask because she didn't have the chops for it. It's not her fault. She really didn't have the chops to do it. But Joel wouldn't listen to us. Stallone, even when he saw the screen test that we did, he didn't care. It turned out he had an ulterior motive, and he intended to use our movie as the consolation prize for when he broke up with her, which is exactly what he did 2/3 of the way through our movie. We were aware of the fact that he was cheating on her on his set because we heard stories. Our production office heard stories from their production office. There's a very famous story about Stallone that he has never denied. The only question has ever been, on which movie set did it take place? And I'm telling you, it took place on Assassins because I had never heard the story before. I heard it for the first time on my set, on the Bordello of Blood set, because I heard it from production office, heard it from the Assassins production office. Stallone finishes the scene, goes back to his trailer, unaware of the fact that his wireless lavalier mic is still broadcasting to the cart. And there's a young woman waiting for him in his trailer, and she proceeds to blow him. And apparently Sly is very particular about how he likes his blowjobs. And so now people are gathering around the sound cart listening to him go, "Yeah, that's right, stroke the shaft, cup the ball. Yeah, cup the ball, stroke the shaft." The next day, he shows up on the set. The entire crew are wearing T-shirts that say, "Stroke the shaft, cup the balls."
Do any of these T-shirts exist, Alan? Have you ever seen one? Because those would be good to find on eBay or something. I would imagine
they would be worth a small fortune. Now, like I said, he's never denied the story. The question's only ever been on what set. I can tell you how I heard the story. It was from my production office. It was from their production office because it happened on their set. So Stallone, I tell the whole story and there's so much more of the making of Bordello of Blood in the first season of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast, which Entertainment Weekly called the best film podcast of 2022. It's the every last bloody, gory detail, humiliating detail, the first season of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast.
I do have a Bordello of Blood follow-up question, though. Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis, what did they think of the show, the movie?
Well, Gale, I don't know. Bob Z was towards the end when we were cutting the show. And towards the end, we were so spent. It was an emotionally draining experience because really every day was negative. It was a negative creative experience. It just sucked the joy and the creative juice out of us. We were cutting it in Los Angeles towards at the end. And Bob came in to help with the cut he had some ideas. And I watched Bob Zemeckis. I was in the editing room for a little bit of this. Bob created a little scenelet, the suggestion of something that we never shot. He creates the inference. He creates the idea that Angie and Erica had something sexual between them, that something sexual happens between them. And Bob saw a way to do it with the bits and pieces of film that we had. He needed one pickup shot, just one body crossing in front of the camera to sell the connection with, you didn't want to see the faces. It was just a mid-body shot. So with one body in the background and the body crossing in the foreground, just to put them in the same location. So in your head, you thought, oh, they are in the same place. Everything else was single. One shot, one little throwaway shot to connect them. And it's amazing how it works. Anytime you have to spend some time on a film set with Bob Zemeckis or an editing room, all you had to do was just watch or listen. You could learn so much. Bob was great because Bob had nothing invested. It didn't make any difference to Bob. Whether Bordello of Blood existed or not, whether it succeeded or failed or not, it was neither here nor there. This was a movie he never expected to get made anyway. And so this was all, isn't this hilarious, guys? We made a deal point. Hey, this is my deal point movie. From their point of view, it was easy. They didn't spend 2 seconds in the trenches. Bob came to visit the editing suite. He had some fun, and he got back to his real life. The movie, we had to start when we started because of our release date, and they did not keep our release date. They let the next thing, it was a Halloween. It were going to be a Halloween release. They let it go, and they held us for the following August. The doldrums. That's like burial at no, not in burial at sea, in a pond in the middle of the woods, and nobody knows. Just awful. I remember by then when we did Bordello of Blood, and then we shot the last season of Tales from the Crypt in London, which was an interesting idea, but there was also a large degree of fuck you to the union. But that fuck you to the union wasn't just a fuck you to the union, it was a fuck you to our crew, our loyal crew who worked for all those years with us. That kind of sucked. But we went to London, and that was great on the one hand because we had, hey, you want to shoot a show that takes place in a castle? There are castles. Holy shit, there are castles. But we were pretty spent by then. I know I was creatively spent on the show, and Bordello of Blood had finished me. I was done. And so I the last season 7 of Tales from the Crypt, except for Scott Nimmerfro's episodes, because Scott still gave a shit. Yeah, except for Scott's episodes, I think that's just a whole throwaway. Forget about it. My fault. But being in England, what was cool, it was a problem though, because it was just more stupidity. We moved to England and we thought we could produce the show in exactly the same way. Well, no, we couldn't. And so we were clashing with our production culture versus their production culture. Now, it was funny in places, in American TV, in Hollywood, let's say, very important, the craft services table. That's the place where the whole crew is going to graze over the course of the day. It's food. And depending upon the budget of the movie or the TV show, that can feed a small nation, a good craft services table. And that's how it is. Our executive producers, Joel and Bob, and when we would go visit their sets, I remember visiting Bob's set, Death Becomes Her. Oh my God! I bet their craft services table had a Michelin star or two. Joel would he would come visit our set because, well, we didn't have that kind of budget for our craft services table. Now, craft services was okay for us. He would refer to it as gum and water. All right. So there's big Hollywood movies. There's ours. We went to England, and we're having a production a meeting with our production manager, Chris. He's saying, talking about the craft services table, and there really wasn't going to be one. He said, so really the question is, when the lads come in the morning, we'll serve them some tea, of course, and coffee for those who want. But the question is the biscuits. And Gil and I looked at each other, and biscuits, that's an issue. What? He said, well, I think we should just give the lads a biscuit. As he said, if you put the tin down, they'll take more than one. And we sat there blinking at them and like, okay. And I forget what the decision was. Hey, it's your country, pal. If you think you can do that to the crew and not have them revolt, okay, go ahead. There were cultural differences like that, took us by surprise, and it shouldn't have.
This is amazing. I have a few trivia points I'm just going to throw at you. You tell
me
if they're true or not. Okay?
I'm trying to give you the inside as dope I possibly can.
I love this. It's down to the biscuit. It's
down to the biscuit. Damn right, man.
All right. So do you know what the show was called in Japan?
Tales from the Crypt?
Yeah, but do you know how it was marketed in Japan? I know that.
I have no idea how was it. Please tell
Hollywood
me.
Nightmare, I guess it was what it was called.
Yeah, at times, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then this was an interesting thing I read, is that the famous tagline, it's not TV, it's HBO, came from and was born from a marketing campaign for the TV show Tales from the Crypt.
It actually, there's a story that goes like this. During the cast and crew screening, a couple of crew in between the episodes, I think the first episode they showed was Dick Donner's Dig This Cat, He's Real Gone, and as they're waiting for the second one to start, two of the crew members are sitting, and one says, wow, that's great TV. And the other one says, it's not TV, it's HBO. And the two HBO execs in the row ahead turn and they look at these guys, they realize, oh my God, we just heard our slogan, but not just their slogan, their culture. And that's really the key. What Tales from the Crypt did for HBO is it changed its understanding of itself. And it stopped seeing itself as TV show with movies, but movies inside little box. And it changed their culture and how they looked for material going forwards. They always had a sense of, if you could see this on TV, not just tits and the word fuck, but subject matter, but scope, but even the small shows had to feel like an independent movie that the TV could never do. And it was a cultural change that allowed them to be a home for a place, something like The Sopranos, Game of Thrones. Their culture had to change so that as they began to think about original programming and their brand, it really started with Tales from the Crypt. And once HBO changed the television landscape, the whole model before HBO became successful at the subscription model, it was all advertising driven. And as I mentioned, syndication. Back in the old days, I don't know if they even do it anymore because it's syndication. Yeah, I guess syndication is still out there, but yeah, you weren't going to pay on the first and the second run for it. You had to get the syndication, and syndication worked. An ad cycle in syndication is 13 weeks. And so you were going to strip the show 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. So 5 times 13 is 65. So in the old days, when you went to pitch a show to the networks, anybody really, it had to be an idea that could survive 65 variations on the theme, because that's how it could be profitable. If it couldn't be profitable, no one was going to do it. So that's why back in the day, they didn't do shows with continuous storylines, because people were going to watch them in syndication out of all chronology. And so everything had to be fairly close-ended. There might be a couple of 2-3 parters, but that was rare because harder to syndicate. They might not be part of the syndication package because they're a problem. When you went in to pitch a show, you pitch something that they could do 65 variations on a theme. And so it limited the kind of stories you could tell. HBO broke that mold because they weren't reliant on 65 episodes. They were subscription. Subscribers were paying for every episode. That really is what Netflix took up. And that's the streaming wars really had to do with an extension of what HBO created. The whole idea that you could eat a whole show in one giant gulp. I love the idea creatively. As an audience person, that can be really a compelling thing. From a network standpoint, that's deadly, because if the audience can eat the whole thing today, what are you going to serve them tomorrow and the day after? That's really expensive to have finished shows that the audience can watch every five. In fact, no one can afford that. It's unsupportable. And that's what happened. Everyone thought for 2 seconds that they could do this. Well, you'd have to get new subscribers at such a rate. It's not possible. It's not going to happen. And so that's why it all crashed and burned. And that's why the TV business right now it's in the shitter for 1,000 reasons, but the economics are completely screwed up because everyone threw their lot in with streaming, and it was never going to work for economic reasons. And now Netflix owns it. Really, Netflix is the god, and they've suddenly realized, we can't afford this either. And so they have advertising platforms. You got to pay extra to do without the ads. Everyone else is watching ads, and it's kind of going back to the old model, but without the 65. That's not baked into the design. These stories are all continuous. You're not going to be able to. There is syndication of a kind. There are places where, there are cable channels, but that's the puzzle that they have to figure out with that. And so the TV business is a mess right now.
I agree with you 1,000%, and can't thank you enough for sharing all these amazing stories with me. You're awesome.
Well, thank you for allowing me to just go on a tear here and a tear there. You are very generous with allowing me to go off.
Oh man, you're awesome, dude. It's just looking at my notes. I meant to say, instead of say, "Hey everybody," in the beginning, I meant to say, hey, boils and ghouls.
Boils and ghouls, boars and ghouls. Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I'm gonna write this down. It's clever.
It's hard to think like the Crypt Keeper. Trust me, you don't do that to yourself. It won't end well.
I was watching a bunch of them. I'm like, yeah, it's not like it looked very difficult, but very good, very well done, sir.
Well,
Very well
you.
done.
Thank you.
Alan Katz, thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate you very much.
The pleasure was mine, and I absolutely look forward to doing it again with you.